in 5. And we're live. Chantal, I think you may.
Can I proceed?
Proceed.
Good morning, everybody. A very, very happy breastfeeding week and a very happy Women's Month to you all. I would like to welcome to all our audiences on our webinar who have signed in, as well as to our Facebook friends that are streaming with us on our Saxco Watch Facebook platform, as well as the South African Breast Milk Reserve platform. A warm welcome to you all. I am Chantal Witten. I am the nutrition lead for the South African Civil Society for Women's, Adolescents and Children's Health, also known as Saxco Watch. So on behalf of Saxco Watch, we are very excited with the lineup we have today because we are going to be discussing in our breastfeeding dialogue why South Africa is struggling with low and suboptimal breastfeeding rates. What helps and what hinders our mothers from practicing optimal breastfeeding currently, and also to learn from our mothers and our fathers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our chairperson, Sis Precious Robertson. She's also the Chief Technical Advisor for Right to Care and has been a passionate advocate for breastfeeding from our PMTCT days. So I'm handing over to Precious.
Thank you very much, Chantal. And thank you very much to the organizers of the webinar. Let me first start by welcoming our patron, Dr. Motsepe. We're happy to be having you here. I am going to introduce to the webinar our organization, which is a coalition of 33 organizations, and it's called Saxco Watch, meaning South African Civil Society for Women's, Adolescents, and Children's Health. Civil organization, institutions, and partners, they work in maternal, child, and women's health and other areas that are looking at the interest of society. And then they have the potential to can influence and support policies and programs to address reproductive health, maternal health, child health, neonatal health, you name it, anything that has got to do with a child and a woman for a better South Africa. We also are advocates for raising awareness. We also work towards making sure and supporting the National Department of Health and other provincial district departments in implementing programs that are earmarked towards the improvement of the health and welfare of mothers and children. We also want to highlight the fact that as advocates, we work as catalysts, including as linkages to communities where the actual beneficiaries of healthcare systems are. And Saxco Watch is such part of the bodies that work with the Department of Health and other departments in ensuring that things are happening. Saxco Watch was born on the 30th of June 2014. This was following some meetings on reproductive health, where in that meeting, including the meeting by PNMCH, deliberations were how do we bring community structures on board to be able to harness the policies and programs that government has into making better outcomes. And by that time, 20 organizations came on board, signed off, and Saxo Watch came. And from that time onwards, Saxo Watch never stopped. And we currently can proudly tell you we are having 33 membership on the coalition, and it is patroned by Dr. Mutsipe. Our main objectives and goal is to ensure that we engage both on community side and government side. And we also inform and we invigorate the agenda for maternal and child health. We are not just looking at that, we also want to bring evidence-based interventions to scale the needed benefit for every person in South Africa. And this webinar is one such evidence that we want to bring, where you have people who have got evidence that when you use breastfeeding, when babies are breastfed, when mothers are supported, we get better outcomes and we have a better nation. And that's what Saxo Watch can do. We also work on mobilizing and building capacity in communities to take action. We're not taking action to revolt or to do what, but to act into activities that can bring about change, to work as game changers, and to ensure that whatever that needs to be done at community level is done. We have got COVID-19 now. There are families that are hungry. There are mothers that are unsupported. They are going through hell. And Saxo Watch, through its member bodies, we've got Save the Children, we've got the angels, we've got vets, we've got, I can name all of them, but they all have got one objective. Can things that need to happen in the interest of the community for better health outcomes be implemented with a good quality at the right time, right moment for right people at the correct time. And that's basically what we as Saxo Watch are watching. We also are trying to mobilize resources. And these resources are not for Saxo Watch. They are mobilized, then are taken back to the community where they can benefit the community. And in its member bodies, a lot of work is being done on ground. Communities are being supported, facilities are supported, and we also are supporting government structures with regards to maternal and child health. Having said that, let me also highlight the fact that we are now, as what I said, we are standing for as right to care, not right to care, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, as Saxo Watch, supporting the current breastfeeding week, World Breastfeeding Week. For us, it's not just about the breastfeeding week, it's about us supporting breastfeeding in South Africa all through the whole year because of the benefits that are there. We are working towards the realization of women and children's health rights, and we are also making sure that women are empowered socio-economically in a way that they, being the pillars of families and communities, can now contribute towards a better nation and a better South Africa. Breastfeeding is the best, it's cost effective, it's nutritional, it gives us better nation. And as Saxo Watch, we're saying, let's join hands together and let's be one and make sure that breastfeeding is implemented in every corner of this country for a better nation for all. I thank you. Let me throw the reins back to Chantal, and thank you very much, Chantal.
Thank you very much, Precious, and thank you for giving us an insight into what Saxo Watch's objectives are and how Saxo Watch works. So as a coalition, I also want to say at this point in time, we invite our colleagues and friends who are watching us to please also think about joining Saxo Watch and to expand our membership. It takes a village to raise a child, this we know, but it also takes a village to raise and support a mother. And we understand that there are a set of criteria that would support breastfeeding locally, internationally. And we are working within a certain context, which we call the nurturing care framework. I would like to ask Dr. Vidad Slemming, who is our lead for early childhood development, to expand on this idea that breastfeeding is central to child health, is central to global and national development, both in terms of nutritional, as we know it, as food, but also we know that it is also a care practice. So Vidad, can you lay the ground for us to expand our thinking beyond breastfeeding as feeding a child?
Thank you, Chantal. Morning, everyone. So most of us have been exposed to the term nurturing care, which was really introduced by the 2017 Lancet series on early childhood development. Now, nurturing care is about making sure that children remain healthy, that they receive health care when they need it, that they get proper nutrition to grow well, that they are cared for in safe, secure environments by caregivers who are sensitive and responsive to their needs, but also that they have learning opportunities from birth. Now, we're very fortunate in South Africa in that nurturing care is not new to us. It's enshrined in our National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy of 2015. It is encompassed in the 5 pillars that we've outlined in our redesigned Road to Health booklet and the accompanying side-by-side campaign. And these all predate the Lancet series on ECD, and it predates the WHO UNICEF Nurturing Care Framework that was launched in 2018. So we really have been committed to this for quite a long time. We have also signed up to global commitments and strategies for children to make sure that they don't only survive, but survive and thrive. And I think in terms of breastfeeding, we often vastly undersell the benefits of breastfeeding because we focus primarily on its nutritional and immunological properties and not so much on these broader benefits that it can have at an individual and societal level. So just to give you an example, promoting and supporting breastfeeding from birth enables the mother and the baby to bond, builds the foundation not only for optimal nutrition and health, but for quality interactions and provides the foundation for nurturing care. So it doesn't only nourish the child, but also the parent-child relationship and enhances the child's cognitive and emotional development. Now, healthy positive interactions between infants and their caregivers, and breastfeeding facilitates this. It has a 2-generational effect. Okay? For the mother, the process of a baby suckling at the breast actually forges new neurochemical pathways in her brain, and it creates and reinforces maternal behavior. The process is aided by what we call chemical imprinting, but also the release of oxytocin, which makes the mother want to respond to her baby and makes her more sensitive to the child's needs. It also supports longer breastfeeding or encourages longer breastfeeding, which we know supports not only optimal nutrition, but also promotes better brain development. Infant, the act of breastfeeding influences the development of the hippocampus, the emotion control center in the brain, but also the interactions between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands, or what we call the HPA axis. And this is important for mediating our stress responses. And so skin-to-skin contact, which is facilitated by breastfeeding, actually helps you to respond to stress better later on in life. And so it's got these huge implications in terms of not only nutrition and health, but also in terms of cognitive and emotional development, which I think we often don't talk about. Now, in terms of supporting women to have a successful breastfeeding experience, evidence tells us that breastfeeding intentions are established by the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And so we have to start these conversations with women early. We know that one of the key factors for successful breastfeeding is having adequate support. But we hardly ever involve the significant people in a woman's life in those breastfeeding counseling sessions. And we know that they are critical to ensuring that that woman has a successful breastfeeding experience. Partners are often not included in these antenatal experiences, nor the conversations, and often don't know their role in terms of how they need to support the pregnant woman, but also their role in early childcare. We need to continue the support after birth. We also know that having a companion at birth results in better outcomes for the mother and for the baby. Having adequate support at birth shortly after birth to initiate breastfeeding and continued support in the first weeks and months after birth and at critical time points are essential for successful breastfeeding. Some examples are when women return to work or school and when We introduce complementary foods into a child's diet. But often we don't use these available opportunities to really maximize our discussions or the gaps in terms of support for women. The World Health Organization recommends at least 6 breastfeeding counseling sessions starting in pregnancy to age 2 to support women to breastfeed successfully. Now, in terms from a health systems perspective, South Africa has adopted 8 antenatal visits, 1 routine ultrasound for pregnant women, and we've got numerous contacts with young children in their first years after birth. Do we use these contacts optimally to try and support women and to support healthy and successful breastfeeding experiences? I don't think so. Breastfeeding is important at any time, but more so now during this unique time in our history. Many South African infants are being born into a time of great adversity. The science tells us that adequate nutrition and consistent, supportive adult caregiving are the best ways to offset the effects of multiple and ongoing adversity and to support healthy growth and brain development. So breastfeeding is one of the best things that you can do for your child. It doesn't only provide protection against disease, but also against the indirect effects that the mental and social impacts to the mother and child at this time may have on their future health and well-being. Provides the foundation not only for good child health and nutrition, but for responsive caregiving, early learning, and the development of healthy social relationships. So we have to do better for children and mothers in South Africa. And it starts in the health system in many cases. And that dictates how we can bring in societies and communities to broaden that support and create enabling environments for successful breastfeeding experiences for mothers and children across our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidad. And thank you for laying the groundwork for our conversation this morning, because we know that the science is well established. We know what we need to be doing. We know where we need to be doing it. But let's look at how our mothers are experiencing this particular journey. So this morning, we are very fortunate that we have 2 mothers who are willing to share a very personal journey with us and to give us some insights of their own challenges and their own experiences within that very health system that we so depend on to actually support our breastfeeding efforts. I would like to introduce Wendy Somalai, who is from Khayelitsha. And Wendy is going to give us her experience as a young mom who also started a business, who also completed a leadership program, all in the time of being a mother. And so, Wendy, tell us, what was your experience? What was some highlights and some lowlights in this journey? And Wendy's baby girl is now 2 years old, so she has got quite a long period of experience under her belt. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name again is Wendy Somlai. I'm a young mother from Khayelitsha, a young entrepreneur with a small business. So I started my business in 2015, and as a township, a young woman, you try and get resources everywhere. You try and make your business work. So through that journey, my business is still at foundation phase. So when I became pregnant in 2018, I was a Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity in South Africa, and it's a leadership program that helps develop a young activist or activists in general in South Africa fighting for health equity. So the program itself, it's quite a demanding program, whether you have to attend the 7 modules around the country, you have to go for a convening in Oxford. So you have to quite attend like a 7-day or a 4-week program. So it was quite not it was quite strenuous for myself, my health, because I became pregnant throughout the whole journey, and I gave birth while I was still an Atlantic Fellow, and that meant that 3 days coming from hospital, I had to go to a module because I was so determined to finish the program myself. So I was a new mother 3 day with a 3-year-old at a 7-day module to attend from 8 a.m. until the evening. So it was quite difficult for me, but it was because I was determined to finish the program so that I can have a better future for myself. Um, my breastfeeding journey was quite difficult in its sense that I'm a new mother, I'm a young mother. As the previous speaker talked about, that new mothers need to get counseling while you are pregnant to the time that you have a new baby. I did not get that opportunity of getting counseling about what is breastfeeding, why is breastfeeding important to myself and my child, and why would I want to finish the breastfeed? Why would I want to breastfeed my child, whether until they are 2 year old or 3 years old? So I gave birth and I was just thrown into the lion's den that I needed to breastfeed. And for me, breastfeeding itself, I knew it was something that I wanted to do because cost effectively wise, formula milk is it's not affordable. It's not expensive, but it's also quite not affordable as a young entrepreneur and it is a single mother. So formula milk financially was not something that I wanted to do. So the option was to breastfeed, but breastfeeding was difficult for myself because it was difficult for me. I remember I had I had emotional days, like a lot. I had to cry a lot because I could not latch on my baby from get go. It was difficult for me to breastfeed the first month or so because latching was a difficult thing, and because I could not latch, my baby could not latch on quite good onto the breast. It was painful for me to breastfeed. And because it was painful for me to breastfeed, it was not an enjoyable journey, but it was something that I had to do because I needed to feed my child. And I also knew that a child that is breastfeed, the chances of getting sick are quite less. So it was something that I had to do, but it was not an enjoyable journey. And because I was a young entrepreneur and a single mother, I found myself having to take my child to crèche, to preschool at a very young age because I had to finish my modules at Tekano, and that meant that I had to travel out of the Western Cape, either whether I'm going to Joburg or to Limpopo. And but the nice thing about the program was that there were opportunities for me to fly out of the Western Cape with either a nanny or somebody to help me take care of the child at the room that I was allocated to while I attend the modules. But that meant that every 2 hours or every time and so I had to leave the classes and the sessions to go and breastfeed and come back. But I appreciated the fact that they were very supportive. The program itself was supportive to me, that I can bring somebody to assist me with the child while I attend the modules. And they assisted with traveling the person, and they assisted with paying the person to be at the modules with me, knowing that I can't afford to pay another additional child care to take care of my child. So the program was very supportive in that. And even afterwards, I finished and I graduated from the program. They were quite supportive. And if I had to attend any any uh any meeting, I could take a child care for to the modules or the meeting. But coming back from the program, it meant that I needed to work because I needed to have an income. I had to take my child to crèche from 1 month old. So my journey with breastfeeding was quite difficult in that because I had to find other ways. How do I support my child? Having to do I take my child to the crèche with pumped milk, or does the child have to start formula from a very young age? So I mixed my child had to start formula and breastfeed at the time. So from 1 month old, because the child has to go to crèche, they have to have formula milk, and when they are at home, I have to breastfeed. But breastfeeding was difficult because you find that the child has to go to crèche, and I have to go to meetings. I needed to work, and while I'm at a meeting, my milk starts to leak and my whole clothes and my t-shirt is wet from the breastfeed. So I had to find alternative ways. How do I pump the milk so that I don't leak while I'm at work or I'm at meetings or I'm traveling? Even I had to travel for other programs such as the Activate Young Change Leaders program. I remember my child was 6 months old at the time and I was still breastfeeding, but because I'm at a program, I'm not breastfeeding for a week. So I needed to find ways on how do I pump the milk and I take the milk out so that my breasts don't become sore while I'm at the program. But that meant that my child is not going to get uh, breast milk for a whole entire week when I'm at a program. So how do I find ways to continue with the breastfeeding journey while I'm at programs or while I'm at work, and I still want to continue with the breastfeeding journey. So it was difficult, but throughout the journey, it was enjoyable at the same time because I found that because my child does get breast milk, they do not get sick quite often. So those were the benefits of having a child that is breastfed, that I don't have to buy medicine all the time. I don't have to go to the clinic all the time. So even that going to the clinic, so it means that I have to dedicate an entire day taking my child to the clinic because they get sick often if they not breastfeed often. So that was the journey for me. I can take any questions if you guys have any questions.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I just want to ask, in your circle of support, who was
Yes.
there for you in terms of helping you on this particular journey?
So my partner is we're not married, so yes, so my partner was supportive in the sense that if I had to travel for work, I can take the child to his family and they will keep the child, take care of the child for me for a week. So I had the support of a family in that way, that if I had to go somewhere and I had to leave my child behind, there are child care, there are people to take care of my child. They are the people to take the child to creche and back. And even Ghana itself was very supportive in that fact because I needed to stop working with my recycling business for quite some time. So financially, they had provided me with assistance with that while being at the program, being unemployed at the time, being at the program, and also finishing the program. So I had received some support and assistance that way.
If you had to give us one word, if you think back to your breastfeeding journey, just give us one word that comes into your mind to sum it up.
Um, it's a nice connection between me and my child. So I loved the fact that my child wanted to be with me and I could cuddle with them and I can watch them grow and even having to feed my child. So I had a nice connection. So it was time for me to connect with my baby at the time. So the connection, it really made the bond between me and my baby quite a lot because I kind of felt guilty having to travel all the time and not being like a full-on mom the way that I wanted to be. So it's strong. It made my bond with my child quite stronger in that way.
Thank you, Wendy. We're going to come back to discussing about connections, about guilt, about how you felt about it. I'm going to ask our next mom who has agreed to share with us her personal experience. This is a colleague and a nutritionist in the field. Pumla Dlamini will be sharing with us her experience and talking about having a particular um, case, having a microprem baby. Over to you, Pumla.
Thank you very much, Chantal, and thank you for the opportunity to share my unique breastfeeding journey. I'd like to start off by really stressing what Vidar mentioned earlier, that it takes a village to raise a child, and father and family support plays a very important role in being able to provide express breast milk, especially in my case for my premature baby. who was fed with a nasogastric tube for the better part of her stay in hospital. So in my case, in life, you have the perfect plan. Here I was with a planned pregnancy with my partner, and we're excited. We both our first child. I'm a nutritionist. I'm eager to breastfeed. I've been preaching about it for 20 years. And so this is my time now to actually practice what I preach. And the reality is that I had to deliver. I am based in Johannesburg, and I happen to be in Durban, in my hometown, visiting my family. And I thought, well, it's still 6 months, it's safe to travel. There shouldn't be any problem along the way. I had traveled before for work. And so out of the blue, this emergency delivery has to take place. My baby was 26 weeks gestational age. She weighed 800 grams. And I was with the gynae I didn't even know who mentioned things like this fetus is not viable. And you can imagine how stressful that situation was. And then after that, I was handed over to pediatricians because they look after the babies in the neonatal ICU. On day one, I remember myself asking the doctor, what role can I play to make sure that my preemie survives? And this was a private hospital, and they're notorious for not being as pro breastfeeding as public hospitals or government hospitals. Let me say, put it that way. But I was actually pleasantly surprised that they were zealously pro breastfeeding. And what they said to me is, we just want your milk. Because here I have a child who's in an incubator. The only thing I can do is open the little incubator holes, hold her hand, and her skin is very sensitive, so I couldn't hold her. There's nothing I can do except cheerlead her by talking to her, and getting her to recognize my voice, and of course express for her so that she grows. As I mentioned, it is a traumatic experience, and it's actually, I realized that it was a traumatic experience because I don't even like looking at the pictures of her in that state. Like, I've saved them, the videos and everything, for when I think she's old enough to be able to understand what was happening. We know about the dangers of having a premature baby. They may die. They're prone to infections in the NICU. Their lungs are poorly developed, and they could have long-term developmental issues such as eyesight and hearing, and poor cognitive development. So those are the things in my mind. And I'm also thinking, what could I have done to prevent this? But of course, life must go on. There were times that my daughter Titi stopped breathing. She had to be put on ventilator, an oscillator for lungs. And then there were times when I saw other preemies die in the ward. So I'll start off with exactly what I did, and what I was required to do, whether I wanted to or not. Pretty much expressing every 3 hours, because in ICU, everything happens every 3 hours. So expressing every 3 hours, every single day and night. And that was really, really difficult because at that time, there was no natural let down reflex. My breast milk had to be induced with medicine by my gynecologist. And I'm actually, like, the one thing that surprises me is that throughout the whole experience, I don't remember myself crying about anything except the fact that I couldn't get milk out on some days. The days when she stopped breathing, I don't remember crying. And I know that I can be very emotional. But the days when I couldn't express, because this is the only thing that I could do to make sure that she lives, I cried. And then I would go home, sit with my family, and they'd make me a cup of warm, very warm hot chocolate, and I'd be relaxed and the milk would start flowing in. I want to talk about father support and what it looks like. In my case, I think my relationship is one way I consider it to be a partnership. You decide to be together, you decide to have a baby, and so there's no there's no man and woman. I'm sorry to say that, but there's no man and woman in my relationship. They are people who are taking care of a baby. And I think one of the things that we need to realize is that men are usually very clueless and rather scared. I just remember the times when my partner would come with me to visit the NICU. He was terrified, but he pretended that he was fine. And so it's very important when we're talking about father support, family support, to communicate our needs and expectations. And what it looked like in terms of him supporting me is visiting the NICU together, the baby together, preparing meals for mom, and doing other household chores whilst I express to reduce the strain um, of life on me. Talking about the experience, tracking the growth together. That's one thing that we actually really enjoyed. That, like, it was like, wow, look, today she did this and she turned by herself. So that was exciting. It was both exciting and scary for both of us. And so those are the things that really helped to make it less stressful for me, because it was a highly emotional time. And I think the one role men can play in that space, I'm just talking, I think in the NICU space and even after birth, is to ensure that mom, if they can't do anything, make sure that mom is okay, because a happy mom means it's easier to express, and you will have a healthy baby who's growing quite well. And family support looked very similar. My mother was a midwife, so she knew like what was happening and what to do. And my late sister was an NICU nurse in a government hospital, and so every single day I'd be like, no, like, what's she's doing this today, so what is happening? And she would be able to answer and reassure me and give me the emotional, not just the clinical support or medical support, but also the emotional support that I needed, because that part is actually quite lacking in hospitals. At the end of all this, the baby grew faster. Chiti grew faster than expected. She was expected to be there for 3 to 4 months because she was a micropim, but she was there for 2 to 2.5 months. We were discharged when she was 2 kilograms. She's now a year. She has 2 ages, chronological age and a gestational age. So she's a chronologically 1 year, and gestationally will be 1 end of September this year. Developmentally, sure, I think that's another thing that I stressed about as well. And my mother was really supportive in that regard. I worried about hearing, Mom, she can't hear me. And at that time, she's like 2 weeks. And at the end, she can hear. We haven't seen signs of poor cognitive development. The pediatricians are quite happy with her development. It's on track. She's lively, she's bossy, she's loving, she's teething and standing. And so I think I was quite pleasantly surprised to have had so much support, because I'm like, I can do everything all by myself. And so I'll hand over to you, Chantal, and thank you again for the opportunity to share and reflect on this journey.
Thank you, Pumla, and thank you very much for sharing that personal journey with us. I want to throw back to Vidad, because both moms use the word, I just had to do it. All they wanted from me was my milk. I had no alternative. So, Vidad, in the context of child rearing and psychosocial support for moms, what are we doing right and what are we not doing well at all?
Thanks, Chantal. So, and I loved listening to your stories because it made me reflect on what is it that we are doing and what are the gaps. And I think one, we've got all these contacts with women during pregnancy, but I don't think we utilize them in the right way. We think we're having conversations with women about how they'd like to feed their babies, but it's not in the way that it's fit for purpose. It's like Wendy was saying, nobody really spoke to her about, you know, the benefits of breastfeeding. But it's not just a lecture about, you know, educating you about why you should breastfeed and why it's good for your baby. It's about really discussing your options with you and how you're going to make it happen. And the key thing that doesn't happen, and I know this from research that we've conducted in Soweto as well, is that there may be some discussion about it, but it's never an inclusive discussion. We are not very welcoming to fathers, and so partners are often not present in these conversations. And even when partners can't be there, it's not often that you find that other family members or friends or support persons are there to have that discussion. And we know how important that is for women. You, both of you, talked about how many people supported you in your journey and how it was different people and they all had a role to play. But we often have very isolating conversations with women about breastfeeding. And so we think we're supporting women and we are talking about all these things, but we're really not doing it in a way that's meaningful and that actually translates into successful strategies for supporting them and for them to be able to problem solve when things don't go well. Because the people who are there to support you at that time haven't been included in the process from the start. So they don't know how to support you. I think Pumla said, we need to be very clear about what it is that everyone can do to help you. And sometimes it's got nothing to do with breastfeeding. It's just to be there, or it is to do something else that's going to help you relax so that your milk can flow and that you can, you can play your role. But we don't really look at it in that kind of way. And so these multiple opportunities we have during pregnancy, I mean, there's 9 contacts essentially. We've got multiple opportunities in early childhood, and we're really not maximizing them. We are educating, we are not looking at supporting often. Not saying that's always the case, but more often than not, these are the kinds of stories that we hear. And I think we can do more. We definitely can. And we have to think about how we can do better. Somebody's just posted into the chat about La Lesh League and their peer counseling program in the Western Cape. And that's an example of things that are happening all over the country. But that should be universal. It should be the norm, not the exception. So yeah, Chantal, lots of work for us, but I'm positive that we've got the foundations to do better. So thank you very much to Pumla and Wendy for sharing the stories.
Thanks, Vidad. Before we move on, I just would like our 2 moms, if there was something that you would change, that to improve a mom, possibly in the same situation that you found yourselves in, Wendy and Pumla, what would be the one thing that you think could have made your journey easier? So Wendy, if there was one thing that you can go back and change over that year that you started, what would be the one thing that you think could have made your journey enjoyable? Because you used the word guilty, you used the word hard, tough, you used the word difficult 3 times. So if we wanted to make things better for young moms, what would you suggest to us?
Okay, for me, what I think would have made my journey better was the only support that I would have about my child giving birth, either from home was at the clinic. So, as the first-time mom, I think if our health system or if our clinics were to have counseling sessions or even sessions about, okay, as a young mom, as a first-time mom, these are the things that a child needs. This is how you can do them. This is how you're breastfeeding. What introducing to breastfeeding is, that those type of classes, if there were things like that at my clinic, I know it would have made a whole lot of things easier. Because the only thing that I relied upon, except at home, was on Pinterest. So if I were to find out, okay, if my milk is not flowing, what do I need? I know my number one support is Pinterest. If I know, okay, now my breasts are hard, what do I do? I go to Pinterest or the internet, and I rely on the internet to say, okay, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. So if I had somebody to support me in that way, it would have been great, but in overall, it was a first time experience. So now I know what to do the second time.
Thank you, Wendy. Wendy, just a quick question. Did you know about the Laleshe League support in your area in Kailicha? Do you know of any community-based programs?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, because I went to two clinics. I went to the one in Site C for my checkups, and from there I got transferred to the one in Site B, but still there was no support there, and I gave birth at KDH. So even there, the support that I had was very minimal. It was just you had to breastfeed, and when the breastfeeding was hard for me, when the latching was hard for me, all the nurses told me what to do was to try and express my milk through a cup and feed my baby that way. So that's the only thing that I had, and even that was even explaining to them was hard, and they did not understand how was it hard for you to breastfeed. So it for me, it seemed that it needed to be a natural instinct how to breastfeed, and it's not wrong. So that was very difficult for me to do, but it was nice though at the end of the day. So yeah.
I'm glad it's ending on a nice note. So yeah, some guidance about support at the community level, at the
Yeah.
household level, and some guidance about coming from the mother's perspective and not from our preachy base perspective. Thanks, Wendy. Pumla,
Thank
if you
you.
had to change one thing to have made the journey better, and I know we are talking in the context of a very special case with microprems, but anything that you think could have changed that journey a little bit to a positive side?
Yeah, the main thing is psychosocial support from the nurse. I have, and I please forgive me. I love nurses because they are two nurses in my household. But at that time, I have never disliked nurses like I did, because it was like milk, 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 milk every single day, and there was no emotional support. I wasn't seen as a human being. I was seen as a producer of milk. um, and they couldn't understand why can't you express, like, we gave you the expressing machine, why can't you do it? And so I was fortunate that I could be able to just go home, because it was about 10 minutes away, and get that support from them. But the healthcare professionals themselves sometimes actually are an impediment to being able to do this, because they put you under so much pressure that you don't want you don't want to do it, or you can't do it. So that would be the key thing: psychosocial support, not just only at NICUs, but also in maternity wards. Because I had conversations with mothers who just given birth to full-term babies, and they felt like the way in which they were counseled about breastfeeding was not positive. It was more like, if you're not breastfeeding, you're a failure. You're not doing well enough. It's either this or nothing at all. Like, you're a bad mom if you're not breastfeeding. And if you have that feeling, you're less likely to be successful in your breastfeeding journey. Over to you, Chantal.
Thanks, Pumla. So again, health system support and supporting moms from where they are and looking at how we do it. So somebody that has been working in breastfeeding education and supporting breastfeeding mothers for almost 16 years now is the South African Breast Milk Reserve. And Stasha Jordan, who has kindly supported this event, has impressed on us that we are not doing all that we can and that we need to talk about the things we can do better. So Stasha, over to you in the sense that you've heard these moms speaking. Vidar has given us a good baseline about what we should be thinking about in terms of nurturing care. So a little bit about your experience and the direction that you think we as a collective, as the breastfeeding fraternity, should be going.
Thank you, Chantal. Yes, indeed, we need to talk. And it's not always an easy talk to have, because you know what I have concluded after 17 years of activism in breastfeeding is that perhaps one of our greatest gaps is that we critically exclude men from the conversation as fathers and in their role as fathers. However, before getting to that part of my short talk, I just wanted to give everyone a background on what the human milk banks do, taking on from Pumla's experience. You have heard that babies often are born a very low birth weight or extremely low birth weight. And our role as the human milk banks nationwide, whether it is ourselves or our partner sister banks, is to meet the gap when, for instance, a mommy gives birth too early, she's stressed. There is often instances where mummies are ill or too ill to lactate. We also have instances where mummies pass away and the babies weigh tiny. They're tiny. They weigh as little as 329 grams. That was our tiniest patient last year. We have to support with donated breast milk because it relieves sepsis or infection in the neonatal intensive care unit. So it's a really delicate space and a really delicate environment, and a really delicate time in a mom's life. As you know, as Pumla said, it's a hard time. It's a really difficult time to look back on. It's a time where mommies suffer from depression, are alone, and especially now, because you know we have to contextualize breastfeeding in the 2020 pandemic space. Mothers with babies that are hospitalized have been impacted and restricted from seeing their babies as a consequence of the access restrictions that have been measures that have been put in place to prevent the spread of COVID. So it's a delicate balance to maintain, but also as a stakeholder group that has for now 2 decades engaged actively and proactively in breastfeeding promotion, what we're seeing is the potential undoing of years of activism because we have lost essential practices like skin on skin, or for instance, babies that are hospitalized with COVID positive moms will be separated for a short period of time, which obviously adds critical mass onto the experience of motherhood, and which we'll be talking about just now. So as a stakeholder group, the South African Breast Milk Reserve is part of the coalition, and we are working towards the expansion of breastfeeding. Our primary role is breastfeeding promotion. And over the last 2 decades, we have converged as stakeholders in breastfeeding with the explicit intent to grow breastfeeding. And we have racked our brains. I'm sure we were in the same room many times over this issue, with the greatest commitment to understand why. What are we doing wrong? Is it really just the marketing of the formula substitutes? What is the true situation that is causing impact in spite of small gains? Because let's also accept that we have made inroads in improving our breastfeeding rates nationally. We have, however, still a really difficult breastfeeding environment for mothers. And what I realize when I look onto the mother population, the moms that we support, the moms that we help, is that women are under critical pressure to not only mother, but to also hold down jobs, to lead households. to feed the rest of the family, not only the breastfeeding infant, and that often has an impact on lactation and the ability to prolong breastfeeding. What we also realize as stakeholders in health is that we have, as I said at the beginning, critically excluded fathers, because we have included men in the conversation, but we have not looked at paternal health and the health of the father. We have not asked ourselves, how do we empower men in their role as fathers? Also because there are a lot of cultural aspects to parenting and motherhood that need to be addressed. You know, there are cultural taboos, there are cultural impediments. Often men are excluded perhaps from supporting breastfeeding women, or we have not given them the tools. So over the years, and as you know, we're having worked on the technical working group for nutrition, we have tackled head-on the workplace regarding how do we support breastfeeding mothers in the workplace. However, this year I was really thinking about this, and the light came on, and I realized that we have talked to the workplace, we have talked to the government, we have talked to civil society and stakeholders, but we have not said, hey dads, we're here, we can offer you support, we can assist you in your fatherhood journey, we can give you the tools to support your breastfeeding partners. We often tend to prioritize the breastfeeding support, the caregiver at the hospital level, the gogo. But you know, this is becoming more and more evident, especially during the pandemic, when dads have not been allowed into hospitals and mothers are birthing alone. Where we've had separations, and also where we have noted in our society at large that we have a growing rate of domestic and gender-based violence. And we ask ourselves, how is this impacting breastfeeding moms at home? We also have a very, very important food security issue that is impacting our women at this time. As a result of the pandemic, 3 million people lost their jobs. Of these, 2 million are women. Now, we need to imagine what it's like to be a mother during this time. And is breastfeeding then the priority? And what can we do to empower men, to create positive role models of fatherhood, of cultures of love towards women and children, of paternal inclusion, so that we can create a nurturing space for the mom, the dad, and the baby, so that we start seeing the family unit as a triad rather than a dyad, where there's a mom and a baby. There is a dad, there is a parent, and we have to be sensitive to the rights of co-parents, of fathers, and of partners in pregnancy. Back to you, Chantal.
Thank you, Stasha. I think you raise pertinent issues, particularly around economic support. And Wendy made mention in her journey that a lot of the pressure was that she needed to go back to work, that she needed to work. And so supporting women with economic rights. And I think we all are aware that the basic income grant is a big discussion. It's a discussion that also will affect women. So that pressure of going back to work seems to be a strong theme. But support, and as you said, can we open the door to have fathers and partners be part of this conversation? And what are their views and insights? And I'm going to hand over to our colleague who's also our co-chair, Save the Children. We've got Patrick Shavuri, and Patrick has been working in the maternal child health space. But Patrick is also a dad to 3 boys and has had the experience of supporting the child rearing and child caring journey with his wife. And so, Patrick, I would like you to give us some of those insights that you've gained from working in communities on the topic of maternal and child health, and then also how you've dealt with it as a father. I think we need to unmute Patrick and
yes.
let the voice of the men out.
Thank you, Chantal. Thank you, Chantal, and everyone. Good morning, colleagues. I am Patrick Shivuri. I am the Health Programs Manager from Save the Children South Africa. and the co-chair for Squash. As you can see from my colleagues, I'm usually the one with the bold voice. Because when it comes to the issues of women and children, there's not so much involvement of men. So we have very less involvement of men because it is seen as women issues. But honestly, when it comes to rearing and raising a child, as I think Stasha put it very well. I will pick up on that, so not so long, but she says we need to create a triad relationship between a child, a mother, and a dad, so that they know that the space of their growth is centered around the three people. I have been working in this space for many years now, but I have also learned that much of what we are experiencing as fathers when it comes to issues of breastfeeding and the child rearing and growing at large is just that it's just not our issues. It's generally perceived as not your matter. It's not your issue. I kind of liken the way we handle the issue of child rearing and growing. I kind of liken it to mostly the way we do with the issues of doing your hair or makeup or anything. I mean, it's none of my business most of the times. So I don't have to be involved as to how does my wife do makeup. So I can support by giving money, but I don't have to be there when she does it because it's none of my business. I think breastfeeding and the rearing of the child, we normally handle it that way. I've learned through my years of also being a father and working in this space that when it comes to the issues of breastfeeding and also bringing up a child, the father has systematically been excluded. And I've heard Vidat saying that very well. I was taking notes of what she was saying in terms of saying partners are often included and not engaged, and therefore they do not know their role as to what is it to play. And I agree fully with that, because I do want to see my wife looking very beautifully, but no one tells me anything about how doing her hair or how to do makeup and everything. So I want to see her being well, but I don't know how because I'm not involved as to how that things are done. So it's the same. I also would like to say again that as fathers, we find ourselves caught in between the two things, because as it has been rightly said, this issue of fathers' exclusion is systemic. It's systemic. Yes, it's systemic. It's systemic in a way that when you look at the hospital, there is no provision for fathers when you go for antenatal visits in the hospital. I've been fortunate, I'm speaking as one of the fortunate people, that when my wife was pregnant with all my three boys, our three boys, the doctors that she was going to, which were private gynecologists, would demand that I be there. I remember there's a doctor in Polokwane who turned my wife away for her visit. I was working I'm based in Pretoria, and my wife is in Polokwane, and he said, no, make a day when he's there to come with you. So I had to take leave to go and attend to the just antenatal visit. And I felt this is good. It was enhancing and benefiting to me, especially because I'm working in the same space, and I felt it makes sense. Let me just make a day, because I couldn't. I had a meeting and my wife said, but you can go. And the doctor said, no, I would prefer that he be there. And mostly because he wanted to show the 3D scan and speak about what to expect and all of that, he preferred that I be there. And I thought this is quite unique. It's not a normal thing. I'm calling it normal because, you know, no one else does it. So another thing is that the experience I've had with having to go to the private hospital for the antenatal visit, they provide what they call antenatal pre-counseling for the new couples to know these things of the passage, the pressure, and the what. So we get there and they give, but one thing is that the passport to attend those classes in the evening and in the afternoon only comes only when your partner is there, which was something good. So I said, these days I sit there, I feel like I'm a lecturer. When I go there, I can correct the lecture and say, it's not mostly like that, because I've attended all of the three. So by saying that, this is what's missing in the system as something that needs to be offered so that parents and fathers know that you are. I know that having worked in the public health space, it has also taught me to know that not all mothers who are pregnant have partners, but there needs to be provision for them to be taught as to who is there to support you to go through this. Because in most cases, women are fed with all good information of what to do with the child, and they get frustrated because when they get home, no one knows how to support them. No one knows what needs to be done. And that is how systemic it is. And because it is systemic, we need to have a systematic approach in order to address it. And if we don't, unless we change the whole system as part of the requirement to say it is there. Special just mentioned something very important, to say that during the COVID-19, and I've seen it on TV yesterday when Dr. Zweli Imbizo was talking, that most fathers have had to struggle with not being there or not being allowed to be in the hospital when their wives are giving birth. It is not seen as something that is important. But you would wonder, one of the things that I've mentioned in the past is that while I was still working in the PMTCT space, we're giving the promotion of mothers to mothers into the hospital. I was leading the program in the entire South Africa. I actually had a problem when I go to the maternity ward, where they would say, they would have a sign written, "No men allowed beyond this space." So when you get to the maternity ward, I would find a sign written, "There's no men allowed." And then they have to explain to them who I am, and they say, "No, he can go through, but we don't allow men this side." I'm saying, but that's quite strange, because most of the obstetricians and the gynecologists that I've seen are men. But you are not allowed to get into the maternity ward. It is something that I think we need to address seriously. Secondly, the pathogen comes naturally with our cultural beliefs, which have now formed our tradition. Our culture eventually forms into what our norms, so they become a tradition. We have a culture that is mostly informed by our patriarchal nodes from where we come from. Men were not allowed to be part of the giving birth or looking at because even the midwives were supposed to be women only, and all the issues of how the child is born were given to women only. Men were not allowed in that space, and therefore a man is not allowed. In fact, traditionally, in some other cultures in South Africa, you cannot see your child until your child is 14 weeks old. So you are not allowed there, because if you are there in that space, and I'm saying patriarchal because I knew the reasons. The reason was that when your wife is pregnant, you were allowed to go and see other women. So because you've been with other women, you were not allowed to then come close to your woman who has a small child, because we don't know who you slept with and what sicknesses she has. So you can't touch the baby. And you needed to also know that there's a cleansing ceremony for yourself to now meet the baby. But that's something that we need to understand, that it is no longer like that anymore. I have had a privilege of being the first person to hold all my 3 boys when they were born. When my boys were born from all the private hospitals, they were given to me. And then I have to hold the baby and then stay with the baby until the mother is prepared, and I hand the baby over to the mother. But that is me. I'm privileged because I did that. I know it is not, because in the other spaces where I went, it's not. I have and still does, even up to this day, run the breastfeeding support groups for women in the public facilities. And one of the key indicators that we've been trying to get was how many of those women who are attending breastfeeding successfully are able to bring their partners along. We have failed dismally from my last program with Mothers to Mothers, and now at Save the Children. We have not been able to get men participating. And we've been always saying, if men, we've always seen, and I have a case in Taung, in the Northwest, where the involvement of men have made the success, have brought much success to the breastfeeding support group itself, and that it became automatically growing and benefiting to the communities because they managed to convince their partners to come. But one thing was that the partners were younger. And because the partners were younger, it was easy for them to understand they need to come with their partners. I think that is the divide that we need to bridge between the younger generations like myself and Sibusiso, who is still young and cool, to be able to bring this. I mean, men were not allowed to cook in the past, but these days you find men who allow themselves to claim the space in the kitchen, prepare food for the family, and it's not something that is done automatically, but I think we need to kind of put more emphasis, bring more information, make it to be something that is doable. And if we are quiet about it and just say men must do something, they will do what they've been told to do, be men and provide for their providers. So money is there, they can go to work, but they have nothing to do with the child. So I think we need to actively play in that space. Thank you very much, Chantel. This is my experience.
Thank you, Patrick. You've raised so many pertinent questions about culture and what we need to be changing and engaging with that culture. And that big P word, patriarchy, how are we going to use these systemic barriers and the systemic nuances to actually shape the breastfeeding world we want to see? Before I move on to Sibusiso, I'd like to ask Sis Precious if she's still with us, because we have seen that in PMTCT, when HIV was just emerging, it was still a woman's problem, but we did get men to become part of that. And so maybe some drawing on the experience from PMTCT about engaging men will help us in this space. I will wait for Sis Precious to come on if she's still with us, because there was also a question posed directly to her about men taking responsibility and men playing that role. Sis Precious, what is your thoughts? And I'm asking you directly from your experience from PMTCT and the work you're doing in Right to Care about engaging men.
Okay, thank you very much, Chantal, and thank you very much to Vidat, Patrick, and the other people who spoke on the experiences. The truth of the matter is that South Africa did manage to move to a less than 5% elimination criteria by 2015, also implementing the Tshwane Declaration. If we all remember the 2012 Tshwane Declaration, whereby we were saying you can still breastfeed your baby when you're HIV positive and still get better outcomes. And that in itself worked well for us when we used the think tank, which was having women who were basically also HIV positive and supporting the other women. And then where there was a father, we sort of had to have programs in place under the PMTC program supported by UNICEF, then sort of give incentives to the fathers to accompany their women to the clinics. The most unfortunate part is that we all know that South Africa has still a problem with the public facilities, whereby the hospitals or the clinics don't have enough space whereby you can have a couple coming in starting from ANC, labor and delivery and postnatal care. But then we sort of had a way of encouraging where this father was available, the practice of accompanying them. Where they could not come because of the effect of the system and people working during the day, we got a way of getting support for them through community healthcare workers who were in the community level. So I think it's not going to be an easy journey, given the context of how the outlook is in South Africa. We're having high teenage pregnancy. We're having children who are actually 12, 13, 14, 15 falling pregnant with no one taking responsibility for those pregnancies. And then the worst part is that when this child delivers, we expect this child to go back to the classroom. There's no societal support for this child, like a facility where this child can have the baby and go to school and have a child to do like Wendy was doing and go and breastfeed in the interim. There's no system in place linking them to the breast milk bank where we can say she can express, and then there's somebody supporting sort of at community level, a child who has had a child and who still needs to bond and bring up a child who will feel brought up in a very nurturing environment. And I think it calls for this coalition and this team to go back and redraw and triangulate ways that we can make this work and make it a thing that is inclusive of men. Patrick has highlighted something very important. I think that's what Umla highlighted as well. For you to have a partner to support you, you must be in a private clinic. You must have a special gynecologist or a midwife who's supporting you. Those that are in government facilities, what happens? And experience is showing us that they cannot be able to sit here and tell you breastfeeding is important, it nurtures, it's psychological, this is because they are looking at catching babies and putting them there, making mothers comfortable and let go. Catching babies, not even a single first hour of helping the mother to latch and to breastfeed. And that in itself shows you that we as society has got a lot to do to sort of work towards that. We can use the PM50 model, but we need to reach to the fathers more, and we need to work intensively because it needs serious community intervention and work that encompasses the others. And then the breast milk bank needs to be marketed more. People need to understand how it works. It's just not about using the breast. You can still use the milk that has been expressed and stored away because of the benefits. I think I can pause here, and then we can take it further if there's something that needs to be taken further. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chantal.
Thank you, Ms. Precious. You raised many, many issues. I think we're going to have many more webinars because the issues of children and children going back to school and supporting children, well, we should say mothers in school settings, is something that we would need to discuss at some point. I do like the idea of programs that support specifically fathers. And I think if we want to engage those fathers, we need to understand how the fathers are feeling, what the fathers' perspectives are. And so we're very excited and very happy to have Sibusiso Filani, who is from Rural Health Advocacy Project. And he himself is a young father, and he has had the chance to engage with young men to talk about specifically breastfeeding and the role of fathers. Sibusiso, we are waiting to hear from you and excited that you are here to share with us as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. So I'm an artist, so my presentation will start off by sharing an art expression, then I'll get into what my thing is about. So, Dino sanalwa musanalwa mdine bungu sana iza glifungula sanala mdine bungu sana. There's a train that comes from Zimbabwe, from Malawi, from Maputo, and all the hinterlands of Southern and West Africa. This train carries with it young and old African men who are conscripted to come and work in Johannesburg and its surrounding metropolitan provinces, working 16 hours or more for almost no pay, deep down in the bellies of an earth, digging and drilling for that shiny, evasive stone. These men, they always think about their loved one when they sit in their filthy, free-breathing barracks and hostel, when they eat their mushmash food that is served to them on an iron plate with an iron shovel. They always sit and they think about their children, they think about their land, their families that was taken from them with the barrel of a gun, a dog, a collaborator. These men, they always curse and they curse the choo-choo train that brought them to Johannesburg. When it comes and puffing and are crumbling and are churning and are climbing, they say, wee, wee. Thank you. That is a rendition from one of the latest greatest contributors to African music, Brahim Masiget. But I want to use this art expression as a way of getting into this conversation. I want to get into this conversation. I've been involved in this conversation for a longest of time as an artist, using my art form to just spark the conversation and open up into what is this about. So the rendition, the poem talks about how men were being removed from the household and the families. I understand it, and it talks about how through colonization, men were removed in family structures and household. And that's why my colleagues would share things like, men don't know what to do when they are there. You know, you're like, yes, I'm a man, I'm a young man, I want to support, but I don't know what to do. And what I've done, so I engaged on a process of inviting young men like me from the rural Eastern Cape, and I created a group I called Ubhlanti. Ubhlanti talks about the crowd where men talk men issues, you know, and I was doing this to just challenge the status quo of where can we talk about breastfeeding and where is it allowed? Is it allowed for men to talk about breastfeeding? Ubhlanti, understand? And part of it was a very interesting conversation because one thing I acknowledge as a young man, a young Xhosa man, I was initiated to manhood, but no one initiates you to fatherhood. You know, you don't know what to do, how to support, you know, and I remember Sis Pumla talking about just not knowing what to do, you know. So I want to talk about something that we as a society have done collectively. We have created a space where we kind of allow for women to train to be mothers, you know. So from simple things like playing with a paper doll. A paper doll gives you this idea of playing with the household. Then there's a child, and then this needs to be taken. You know what I mean? But a boy child, there's no even games that will encourage you that one day you grow up to be a father. So when that time comes, a young father doesn't know, he's clueless. He's never been played a paper doll because of how we've just designed how we raise our boy children different from our girl children. So out of the focus group, one thing I learned was very interesting. Young men were saying, yes, there is a role of a father in breastfeeding. It's just that we don't know what is that role, understand? And I think there's a deeper conversation we still need to have as a society into like working with programs, because that's what we have done as a society. We've created programs post apartheid and in the early democracy stages and still continuing, where we are moving young girls from kitchen roles to maybe office roles. So there are programs that will move them into becoming CEOs or whatnot, into men's spaces. But what we have not done, we have not removed men from their role as providers and cash men into household role. So they don't know what is their household role. So even if you bring him back into a household, they don't know actually what is the role of a father in a home. But they know that the role of a father is to just pop up money. I don't know what's going to happen with the man who's buying the groceries. How is that going to happen? As long as I can pop up. So I think there's a work we still need to do as a community into re-enrolling men into family structures and family systems before, as we have done, enrolling girl children and young women into roles in working places. So that's what I wanted to share. So my findings showed me that actually, as much as young fathers, they want to be supportive, they just don't know because no one initiated them into fatherhood as much as people initiate them and advise them about manhood. So that's my piece. I can allow any question.
Sibusiso, that was absolutely beautiful. And thank you for sharing your talent and bringing us to dig deep into our hearts. So we are, we started with the head, with the knowledge, and now we are getting into the heart. So thank you for forcing us to remember that men are also feelings, they are also aspirations, they are also, they have their children at the forefront. So the question that I'm going to pose to both you and Patrick, since you are talking for our men, is how do you think we can start to engage men? We've heard about the health system, and Sis Precious indicated about bringing men to with interventions focusing on men. But as two men here today, what would you say that we need to start engaging men? Where do we need to engage them, and how do we need to engage them? I know this is precious, and I will come back to you. Imbizo, you want to kick off?
Okay. I think personally first, how we can engage men is to start allowing them to be involved in the conversation. I think that's for me the start point. As Patrick was saying that there are still like cultures where it's still that a man is not allowed around a child. I know I come from that cultural background. So starting to involve them in the conversations around from pregnancy. So I think that's the first step we need to bring forth. So also, but I want us to a little bit challenge the status quo into like working around the ideas of how we raise our boy children. And as we raise our boy children to be car drivers, that's why we buy them car. We raise them to be mechanics, that's why we buy them toy tool. But I think we should also consider like opening up for them to play with dolls, so that we start at an earlier stage to introducing this idea of being involved. So I think it's about how we raise our boy children. That's where we can start, and then in that way, later on we'll reap the rewards of finding them being involved and knowing that there is a role actually you can play in FM. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Imbizo. Patrick, where do we
Yes.
engage our men?
Like I said earlier, that if the problem is systemic, it can only be addressed systematically. So we need to include that in our systems. The way we'd rather have a space where we say men are not doing what has been provided for them to do, than to exclude it as if it does not exist. For instance, the only part if a woman is giving birth, if and I know it happens in private institutions, that there's a chair that is only reserved for the father. If there's no father, then no one else is allowed there. But imagine in our public hospital, there's no space like that. There's nothing where they say, you are allowed in here. So if he'd rather be absent so that we blame him than not to provide for him to be there, because then we give him an excuse not to be there. So I'm saying our systems needs to be designed in a way that it acknowledges that he was supposed to be here and he's supposed to be here. Not that it's a must, because I know that not each and every person who is pregnant, especially in our African culture, not everyone who is pregnant actually have a father, or the father may be able to come and say, it's me. But I'm saying we should be able to say to a person who is pregnant, we know you could not be pregnant by yourself. So we always provide for the other partner. Just as much as your birth certificate asks, the birth certificate of a child already provides a space of saying, you can't be a person who is a mother alone, you and who. And people choose not to provide, or provide and say me and so. So I'm saying that it should be systematical, that men are actually included as having to play a certain role to say this is what you need to be. Because if you look at this, as much as I agree with everyone else, and I've understood the context, our context in South Africa, that in most cases to protect women, we may actually say, you know, it's not compulsory, but you can, you know, bring your man if he can. We can do that, but let us have it as something that needs to be completed, as we need to know if you can. And if you can't, you need to say it's not available, so that it's something that is required. That's exactly what my feel is, that our whole system, the antenatal visit system, the prenatal counseling systems, and all the preparatory towards becoming a mother and whatnot. Becoming a mother does not really say anything about where is the father. So I just want to say that we need to have it included. If we have it included, then we will then be able to address what Imbizo is saying, that what are we saying to the gender role that a man has to play in raising a child? Because in most cases, and I've had my two colleagues speaking about it, that in most cases, men, Stasha and Vidat said, men just don't know what to do because no one have told them you have to be doing that. So as you grow up knowing, I mean, I don't think there's many men like me who can change a diaper successfully, who can actually look at, no, I can. And I've done that and I'm not ashamed. I do change them, my kids. I do sit with them until they know that if mama is not there and I need to go to the toilet, daddy is here. So we need to actually provide that space until it's a norm in our society. And that the very same way we did with women. We have empowered women by trying to say to women, please know that your role is not only in the kitchen. You are allowed to dream beyond your spaces. Spusis have put it very well. Men actually think that they still own the other part, they just welcome men. We must have, and I wrote in the group that we must have a 360-degree approach where a person knows that as an adult, it is my role to play in this part and in this part. So I have all the 360-degree role to play because I'm an adult and I'm a parent. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I cannot concur more. I see Stasha. Sis Precious, you wanted to say something? You're still muted.
Mute.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Chantal, I wanted to take us a step back to what Patrick has actually said. And I also want to talk to what Usbusiso said about boys being initiated into manhood. And then I also, if I'm not wrong, heard him talking about something like they've got a forum where it's men only going there. What I want to understand from the two of them is, do they think there is a possibility or an opportunity in those forums where a boy is initiated into manhood to also be taught into responsibility with respect to having a baby and making sure that the mother and the baby are supported all through from delivery upwards? And I'm saying this because we still have those cultures, we still have those initiations, but then we've got a different and diverse cadre of young boys now who are growing in a different environment where they want to feel like being fathers. And I don't think they would be happy to be told, oh, you have to stay for 14 days and go elsewhere and come back for cleansing and whatnot. Is there an opportunity for them, wherever they are, in those forums, to sort of introduce this responsibility model? Because I think culture in its days, we're sort of trying to, what can I say, make women just vessels and not partners in relationships. So now we've got partners in a relationship, like what Umla has said. Is there any chance that as they are being told, now you are a man, you can go and make babies, you are strong, windowed, can they also ask, how then do I move forward after being a man into making sure that I am a father? And then how then, when you are having these forums that are talking men only, can you as men, Sbusiso and Patrick, talk to other men about the responsibility of supporting your partner during labor, delivery, and all through breastfeeding?
Okay, I can come in.
Go ahead, Sbusiso.
Yeah. So what usually happens, you are advised about taking responsibility. It's just that as it goes thus far, is that the responsibility or the support is defined as financial. You know, so in this forum they tell you that you must take care of a family, but the definition is still limited to financially taking care of or of supporting, you know. So I personally have been in these spaces. It's difficult to be in those spaces and try to just broaden the explanation of what they call support. You understand? I'm always challenged. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing. But what I'm saying is that we should, as a society, beside those spaces, we should elongate the definition of support, not as finance only. You know what I mean? So because it stems from our home where we define a man's support as financial. That's why we have support grant. People are quick into jumping into, you're gonna pay support. They don't think about, if you are paying support, what is your role after the financial support, which is attachment support, playing support. Even playing is a support. It's a form and a mechanism of supporting, you know, a child. So I'm saying, talk about responsibilities, just that it's still limited, and our role as advocates is to help them expand with the definition of what we define as support, and that with community what defines support. Yeah, so that's a little contribution.
Thank you, Sibusiso. I see Stasha has a hand up.
So I guess we should talk about mother, father, and parent baby-friendly initiatives rather than just mother and baby-friendly initiatives in the health system. We have programs that are mother and baby-friendly. We need to really start embracing this need to educate fathers in their parental role, echoing what Sibusiso is saying, that the man is often it's often minimized to just a provider and not considered from a psychosocial, from an emotional, and from an educational point of view. So perhaps we really need to revisit our programs to have mother, father, baby-friendly initiatives rather than just mother and baby-friendly initiatives. Thank you.
Agreed. I think that just creating the space and creating the new language and having inclusion in that language will make a big difference. And I've noted for Saxco Watch that Sibusiso said we need to start that conversation. So a year ago, we talked about the men's conference, but I do think that we need to have the breastfeeding men's week so that we can start engaging our fathers and building on this. Before we close upon this particular topic of the role of men, I want to go back to Vidad and Pumla. Vidad, specifically to talk about how does the early childhood development space allow us to bring some of these systemic changes that Patrick was alluding to, and Sibusiso made very clear how we orientate our boys, how we bring up our boys, how we position boys. How much of the ECD space will give us opportunity for that? And Pumla, while you are thinking, there was a lot of issues about culture. And so I want to come back to you and ask, how can we start changing culture, or which parts of culture can we start changing? So over to you, Vidad.
Thanks, Chantal. So for those of you who have read the National Integrated ECD Policy, you would know that it says there that, you know, development starts at conception, or before conception, it actually says in brackets. And that's also shown in the global ECD literature. And if you look at nurturing care, it says it starts during pregnancy and up to the age of 3. And so there's a real push to look at preconception. So what Sibusiso and others have been saying about how do you engage with young women and men before they become fathers and mothers and before they become pregnant. But a lot of the current initiatives are focused on children, and then also what can we do in the pregnancy space. And I think that's where we need to do more. And so the ECD space, along with the breastfeeding kind of arena, have been quite late in terms of looking at initiatives. We are currently testing out interventions during pregnancy here in South Africa, in Soweto. And I can tell you that we're one of the very few places where this is being done. So we are almost navigating that space in many ways. But we've got multiple opportunities to do that, starting in pregnancy and building on during the childhood period. And because we make breastfeeding as part of this broader discussion around caregiving and parenting. And I love the fact that Sibusiso said playing is a way of providing and caring for your child. And I think that's the kind of discussions. And you talked about inclusion. You know, it's not just about partners and women, fathers and women and children. We can't think of a nuclear model in our society as being the only one. We have to think about this notion of a village, because we know that there are many, many other people that help us in that journey to caregiving, and caring for us as individuals, as caregivers, but also care for our children. And if we bring everyone into the conversation and start changing those social norms around discussions around breastfeeding and roles for everyone in that, whether it's a grandmother or father or an aunt after the baby while the mother's at work or goes to school, I think that's the kind of discussions we need. And I think what the ECD space allows us to do in the nurturing care discussions is to situate breastfeeding into a bigger caregiving environment, and to bring the notion that breastfeeding as part of this composite of what we think is important for children. It's not only about health and it's not only about growth, but it's about, a bigger picture in terms of health, growth, and development. And not only just for now, but how that can build towards future well-being. And so I think that's important, that really we can leverage on the opportunities in the broader ECD space to really also push around some of these difficult conversations around breastfeeding and bring it all together, because it's really a continuum. It's a continuum of care that needs to start quite early and continue during childhood. And it's not just about breastfeeding, but breastfeeding being a very, very important component of that discussion. Thank you, Chantal.
Thanks, Vidar. Pumla, you just need to unmute.
Thanks, Chantal. So I'm just going to be general and then sort of personalize my experience. I went to West Africa to specifically make a baby. I'm joking. It occurred in South Africa. But as much as they also have patriarch, it's an African culture where men rule other roosters of the hen pen or whatever you call it. But my partner's mother taught every single person in the household, there's 6 of them, and he's the eldest. Whether you're a boy or a girl, you sweep, you clean, you cook, you help in terms of looking after your younger brothers and sisters. I don't know, recently I posted a picture of my partner backing, I don't know what you call it, or
Abba.
That word, I don't know how to do it, and I'm not planning to do it. And so I think one of the biggest things that really irked me about patriarchy is that women themselves are the ones in South Africa, in Southern Africa, in Africa, who perpetuate it, who say, no, the boy can come back at 10 p.m., but the girl has to be home by 6 p.m. The girl must sweep and clean and whatever. The boy must cut the grass once a month. So he doesn't have a lot of responsibility. And so I think it's actually like, we can talk about systemic and systematic changes, and they contribute a lot. But there's a lot of the things that the way that we grow up is based at home and how we are parented. And let's go back to me, myself. I am an over communicator. If you are sitting there and I need something to be done, I will tell you this needs to be done, because sometimes he just doesn't know. It doesn't occur to him that I need to stand up and do this. So it's also going back to the fact that we need to make it our responsibility as women to communicate that, you know what, the dishes are dirty and I'm busy feeding Titi right now. So I think somebody needs to wash the dishes, and it's not going to be me because I'm busy with my daughter. So I'll pause there.
Okay, so this has wrapped us on the cultural aspect, putting the responsibility back to women, changing systemic barriers, and using the ECD space. And I think that was a very enriching conversation to have, because there are so many perspectives that we need to take into account. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now, because we are still in COVID-19 pandemic state. And we, as Stasha had said in the beginning, that our mothers are also experiencing a lot of isolation and they are alone. So I'm going to move on, and we have two moms who are willing to share their experience with us. The first one is Basani, and Basani may or may not be with us. She was going to talk to us about her experience in a hospital out of Limpopo. Is that right, Basani?
Yes, yes, it
Thank
is.
you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chantal. I'm Basani Genaro. I have a 6 weeks old baby boy. I gave birth in June. You know, it were labor pains and then taken to hospital by my mother. When I got there, at least they managed to get us in, both of us, me and my mother, into the labor room, and she was my companion there. Unfortunately, it had to be an emergency Caesar. Then we all went to theater. She was my companion also in theater. So that part, it's a thumbs up, and I was happy about the experience. But thereafter, we went to the postnatal ward. Then she came in with me to the postnatal ward, but she went back home to freshen up, you know, and she thought she would come back to the hospital. When she came back, they said, no, you cannot come in because now we are experiencing this pandemic. We cannot allow you in. What if you infect us and the patients inside? So she had to go back. So I had no one to support me. I had no one to visit except for the nursing staff who were there with me. And you know, sometimes you just need that brush on your shoulder to say it's gonna be okay, or maybe, you know, it was a cesarean section, the pains and all that. You have no one to share that with. Just the social support is not there, unless if you phone someone. And the baby then was brought in 6 hours later, and I felt this does not really support breastfeeding. And you initiate breastfeeding like 6 hours later, you are not sure if it will be successful or not. And after that, I had sore nipples. Like 2 days later, I had sore nipples. And there was one lady who came in. She's not a lactation consultant, but she says she's a former midwife and then worked in pediatric ward. She's passionate about breastfeeding. She just comes and sees the patients there. She came, gave little support about breastfeeding, and she educated about breastfeeding and management of the sore nipple. Then I went home 3 days later. Then the family could only come then just to fetch us from the hospital when I was discharged. But all the way through from the postnatal ward up until then, there was no one to come and visit. And then we went home. The sore nipples continued. And I only realized after consulting with the lactation consultant that it's a posterior tongue tie. And you know, breastfeeding was just a painful experience for me. I had the sore nipples and then they healed. Now he's pinching the nipple. You know, I'm not feeding from the breast, so to say. I'm expressing and then giving the baby the expressed breast milk. So it's a strenuous exercise, so, to tell you the truth, because every 2 hours I must be expressing. I don't have time to myself. Day and night, I have to be, you know, trying to get something for the baby to drink. And the complications with my breast did not stop there. I had a bleb after the milk flow was not as high as I wanted it to be. And then at some point, the milk injection came in a little bit, and then I had a bleb. Now, the bleb it's resolved, but still the pinching goes on. So I'm an expressing mother who is feeding the baby expressed breast milk. I'm not feeding from the breast successfully as I wish to, but I am persevering with breastfeeding. My support structure is my mom, as I said from the beginning. You know, she doesn't want to hear anything about formula or any other substitute. When I go like, I don't have enough for the baby to feed, she's like, you will have enough, get some rest or drink some water or sleep. And then after you express, she is my number one supporter. I don't want to lie to you. And the lactation consultants, I have two of them. One is a colleague, is a dietitian. The other one is a speech therapist and a lactation consultant. So whenever I have problems, they know I'm always on the phone. I call, Punyuka, help. You know, I don't have enough milk. And then she would assist, I know about breastfeeding. I've been educating, training, educating mothers, training other health workers, but when it's me now, it's like I am the patient. Sure. I told Kerry the other time when I wanted to buy the breast pump, I said, I'm just a patient. I don't know anything about breastfeeding now. Any information you need to tell me, just tell me. Don't tell me or don't think I know, because now it's like I don't know anything. Sure. So I didn't have enough milk. I had to get lactogox, things to help me to produce enough up until now. So that's my experience. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Basani. Thank you. I'm sorry if I feel like I'm rushing. I'm just watching the time. But we have firstly we have Dr. Begas with us, and Rahma is a Leleshe League leader. And for our viewers, but Basani shared a lot of technical information about a tongue tie, about cracked nipples, not enough milk. Can you just give us some guidance so that our viewers also have some understanding of what should they be doing and what could they be doing and where is the help?
Thank you, Chantal. And Basani, I just want to say really well done on getting to 6 weeks. And your story, I'm sure, has resonated with a lot of the audience, because it's not always easy. You might have all this knowledge on board, like you said, and you might know that breastfeeding is really important to do, but when it comes to having problems, then we don't know what to do. And I think that's true for a lot of women who abandon breastfeeding. I think many women want to breastfeed, they intend to breastfeed, but somehow along the line, things don't go quite right. And pain is definitely one of those reasons why women, don't persist. And the other thing you mentioned was you're worried about your supply, which is also another common concern for new mothers. Then work was discussed, I think, by some of the other panelists. That's often a time where women think, I automatically now have to put my child onto a bottle, and that might not be true. And then the other common reason why women abandon breastfeeding is medications. Often they are using common medications, and they assume that, or their healthcare provider assumes that they have to stop breastfeeding for that time. And most of the time, in fact, I can say the majority of the time, that is not true. With your story, Basani, you have some background knowledge, so you know that the baby wasn't brought to you quickly enough. And with cesarean section babies as well, they tend to be a little bit more disorientated. some of the drugs from the cesarean section goes through to the baby, so they are not as responsive. Some of the fluids from the drip you had during the Caesar also goes through to the breasts and makes it a little bit harder for the baby to latch on immediately. So there are those challenges, but skin to skin is super important. Chantal, you were asking about where are the answers, where are the solutions. Widad gave us a little bit about information on skin to skin, but we tend to think about skin to skin as something that we should just do for an hour or 2 hours and that's it. But skin to skin is actually very important for as long as you possibly can. And skin to skin gets all the hormones in the right place. Oxytocin levels are higher in the mother and in the baby. And coming to a large part of the discussion on fathers, you know, our men don't have the oxytocin on board. They didn't have that, they didn't give birth to that baby. And they're not breastfeeding the baby, so they don't have the oxytocin on board. But just putting the baby skin to skin with the father can elevate oxytocin levels and can help with bonding. So if we're looking at what can we do in practical terms, that is definitely something we can do in practical terms. Put the baby skin to skin on the father's chest. Put the baby skin to skin on the mother's chest. And do it as long as you possibly can. And I'm talking hours and days and weeks, because even a baby at 6 weeks is still probably learning how to latch correctly. And skin to skin assists that process of helping to latch. Skin to skin maintains the baby's body temperature, it regulates their heart rate, it regulates their breathing patterns, and so all they can focus on is growing. The mother becomes like an external incubator for the child. And you know, when you have that bonding happening, because our babies don't come with language, they don't come out being able to tell us what's wrong. They can't communicate with words. So we do need the emotional connection. We do need that right brain connection. Breastfeeding is very much a right brain activity. So it's one way of helping the mother. When they're in skin to skin, the mother starts recognizing this cries for this. When my baby moves like this, it means this thing. When my baby squirms this way, it means that thing. You know, and the same for dads. They start becoming responsive. They start falling in love with their children. And love is a very powerful emotion because it guides our behavior. And as Widad said, you know, when you're in love, you don't feel stressed. You don't feel scared. So when you fall in love with that baby, you don't feel as scared to pick up the baby, to handle the baby, to change the diaper, to clean the baby, to do that bathing. You connect, you touch. It's a human emotion. And it's responsive parenting. So as they grow up and we do a lot of skin to skin and we do a lot of breastfeeding, we also start learning to know them and they start learning to know us. We also forget that breastfeeding is not just for the baby, it's there for us as mothers as well. It's there for families, it's there for the community as a whole. You know, breastfeeding is part of what a woman's body is supposed to do. So it's not a surprise that all these studies show that if a woman breastfeeds, she reduces her risk of breast cancer, for example. She reduces her risk. It's what our breasts are meant to do. It might not always be easy. You know, it doesn't just come naturally. But skin to skin is one of those ways of certainly getting things on board. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'll just mention that La Leche League has got a huge Facebook group, and we do have a website, so it's lllsa.org, and please reach out. I'll share my number as well if anyone wants to contact me. And by all means, you know, we are there to help, and we do deal with the practical side of things on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you, Rahmat. Thank you very much. We have one more interesting case. So we talked about microprems. Now we're talking about twins. So we've got a power couple that has shared. I'm looking at Stasha. Are they online, Stasha? No?
unfortunately, we lost them.
Oh, we lost them.
We lost
Okay.
them. So we can perhaps proceed on the program.
No problem. Rahmat, just because we do have viewers and we do know that COVID-19 has been raised as an issue of concern with breastfeeding moms, as our medical doctor, can you just give us a statement about breastfeeding in the context of COVID-19 and if a mom is positive?
Okay, so Dad was saying earlier that, we always focus on the immunological benefits of breastfeeding and the importance. And for me as a medical practitioner, it's super important to keep our children healthy. It's our future generation. So breast milk has got antiviral properties, it has anti-infective properties, and it protects babies. And we tend to forget that babies have an immature immune system. In fact, anyone who's got a little toddler at a creche will know that they tend to get sick more than anyone else, But as they grow older and as they enter primary school, suddenly all the sore throats and the runny noses and the ear infections all suddenly stop. And if you think about when that stops, it's actually quite late in childhood. I mean, it's around the age of between 4 and 7, sometimes even 10. And that's where the child's immune system actually becomes mature to the level of an adult's immune system. So children are extremely vulnerable to infection. And we have this wonderful thing called breast milk. And it has wonderful things like something called secretory IgA, which just lines your secretions, and it's available in your digestive fluids, it's available in breast milk, it's available in tears, and it's just there, it flushes out all the germs. It has this wonderful just flushing effect, So, but mothers who are COVID positive, by all means, you should carry on breastfeeding. You should carry on doing skin to skin. Some of you may remember a few years ago when swine flu first hit, right? Every few years we have these new germs coming up. And for some reason, everyone always freaks out about breastfeeding. But at the time, there were these studies done on the mothers who continued breastfeeding while having swine flu and the mothers who stopped breastfeeding while having swine flu. And the babies that were continued to breastfeed had much better outcomes. They survived, for one, and even if they did get sick, they got sick very mildly. And while COVID is very new and we are still waiting for all the studies to come in, at this point, there's no evidence that breast milk or breastfeeding transmits COVID. So mothers, these are, this is our way to protect our babies. Skin to skin protects babies and breastfeeding protects babies. So please carry on. You can still wear your mask and still wash your hands. But even if you don't have a mask, you can still carry on breastfeeding.
Thank you, Rahmat. Thank you so much. So finally, ladies and gentlemen and our viewers, thank you very much for hanging in there with us. We had such a rich conversation that I was not a very good moderator. We are 3 minutes over time, but I've saved the best for last. So as you know, Saxco Watch patron is Dr. Tsepo Motsepe, and Dr. Motsepe has stayed with us this 2 hours. So Dr. Motsepe, we want to say thank you very, very much for being with us and for listening to the conversations. And we would like a final word from you. And we want to also say to the viewers out there that Dr. Motsepe keeps Saxco Watch on its toes as far as breastfeeding goes. It's the one time Dr. Motsepe says, what is happening with World Breastfeeding Week? So thank you, Dr. Motsepe, for your energy around the breastfeeding agenda. And I hand over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Good morning to the viewers, guests, and especially our breastfeeding mothers. Chantal, you've been a very good host. And with your pleasant face, you've really made, you've made us all feel less anxious, less stressed. Thank you. I'd like to thank all our panelists from all over the country. Now, we have endured many challenging months due to COVID pandemic. but I'm grateful that we as SESCO Watch, and I hope the whole country, we have not been robbed of the opportunity to celebrate and to highlight and to raise awareness to World Breastfeeding Week in this year of 2020. As a patron of SESCO Watch, I have looked forward to the activities and celebrations throughout the week of, it's the week from the 1st to the 7th of August. But we hope it's not just going to be, just like Women's Month should not just be in August, it should be throughout the year. This year, we are mindful of the impact of COVID-19, and we offer our sincerest condolences to many who have lost loved ones and to the millions who are enduring the hardship brought on by the difficult circumstances of the economy, of losing their jobs, of not being able to generate income. We really hope that, you know that we are compassionate and we understand we understand what we are going through. However, I am pleased that the scientific community and the National Department of Health continue to share the same conviction, namely that breastfeeding is the best protection for our children. Even if a mother is positive for COVID, and we have heard it repeated by Rahmat, that breast mothers who are COVID positive breastfeed, and all the benefits that the baby and herself will receive from breastfeeding. As we have heard from previous speakers, breast milk, we should really say, is a superfood for children. At SESCO Watch, we are committed to raising awareness and galvanizing action in order to promote, to protect and support breastfeeding. We have a mandate to do so because many of our nation's children are not benefiting from optimal breastfeeding. There are too many children who are not breastfeeding, but really should be breastfeeding. The latest demographic health survey from 2016 reported that 1 in 4 children under the age of 2 years have never been breastfed. At 25%, this is a monumental statistic. These children are at an increased risk of poor health, and development outcomes will have higher risk of developing chronic health conditions like diabetes, obesity, hypertension, not to mention the lost potential of neurocognitive development. It is now well established that breastfed infants have a higher IQ scores as adults. This year's theme for Breastfeeding Week reminds us that breastfeeding is not only good for the individual child, but it's good for our communities, for our country, and ultimately for our planet. Breastfeeding has wide-ranging socio and economic benefits. Yet, despite this, South Africa has one of the lowest breastfeeding rates globally. That is really quite a cause for serious concern. In our country, women in general face a hostile environment, even more so during the COVID pandemic. We have been told that almost 50% of South African households are female-headed. Of the 3 million people who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19, 2 million are women. Furthermore, approximately 9 million children live in fatherless homes. Sbusiso and Patrick, congratulations, and I hope you continue to encourage other young men to do what you are doing. Now, having fatherless home, it places an extra burden on women, and most often mothers. They have to provide financially for essential food, for essentials like food, transport, and healthcare. Now, lack of breastfeeding implies reliance on other infant foods, and often they are expensive and other unaffordable commercial alternatives. This leads to inappropriate feeding with the introduction of other foods before the age of 6 months. The World Health Organization and the National Department of Health recommended exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months. They also promote continued breastfeeding until the age of 2 years. You know, I've heard it also mentioned by the other speakers that children should be breastfed for long. And I was quite impressed hearing that even at the, one of the big companies have agreed that a father should have 3 months maternity leave and a mother 3 months maternity leave. How they take it, the couple will decide how they do it. And that will benefit the child, because even the father will have a time to spend with a child. Now, promoting continuous breastfeeding until the age of 2 years or more in the era of lifelong antiviral treatment for HIV, it means women can now safely breastfeed their infants under 6 months and do not need anything other than breast milk for their nutrition. We also know that breast milk is a unique material that adapts to the needs of the growing infant. Breast milk provides nutrition, immunity, and unique nutrition to promote neurocognitive development. I'm repeating what other speakers have also said. However, in order to support mothers to breastfeed, we need to create a supportive environment at home, in our communities, in our workplaces. Now, breastfeeding mothers face an inordinate amount of pressure. This includes the negative influences of hostile family members who do not support the mother's role in nurturing the child as she sees fit. It also includes hostile public spaces that do not cater for breastfeeding mothers, such as the malls, restaurants, the workspace. And in public, we've said it before, if animals can feed in public, like the little cow, also feed anywhere, in any space. This is why the wider engagement of relevant communities and sectors to improve the domestic and social environment for mothers and allow them to breastfeed comfortably and peacefully is very important. The more children are breastfed, the more and the better the health benefits, the protection afforded, even into their adult lives. Now, COVID-19 has compelled us to have compassion and to stand in solidarity with each other. Now, more than ever, we need to stand with breastfeeding mothers and women in general. After all, breastfeeding is the best for our babies, the best for our country, and the best for our planet. Thank you. Chantal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Motsepe, and we are grateful for your time. We are grateful for your energy and your enthusiasm. And as you've heard from the panelists, there are many, many more issues and questions that we need to be answering. And I am committed and saying ahead of time that Saxkawatch will host many more of these dialogues. We've seen that our audience has welcomed it, they've enjoyed it, and they certainly want to have more. So to our audience, we are going to sign off. Thank you very, very much for being with us up until the end. We will be on our Facebook. This was a live recording, so you will be able to see it again on the various platforms. And to our panelists, a very big, special thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and goodbye.